This is your morning boost, recorded in the Forward Ed Network studios. A weekly spark for educators and school leaders ready to lead, teach, and live with greater intention. This is your morning boost.
Welcome to your morning boost. Happy July, everybody. It's crazy. I mean, we're already halfway through another calendar year and getting ready for another school year coming up. So here we go. There's not much that we can do to stop that momentum from happening now. But like I said, thanks for joining me on a Wednesday. And if you're listening to this, you're likely sitting in your office, maybe a quiet classroom, or maybe even taking a brief break during these summer weeks to think intentionally about the upcoming school year. Depending on your district's calendar, you might have just wrapped up the post school cleanup, or you might be deep in the middle of master scheduling and budgeting and leadership retreats, all of that great stuff that we do in the months of June and July. This is the season of the clean slate. July is when every system feels possible. The hallways are empty, the data is stacked neatly in our spreadsheets, and we have the mental space to think clearly. But it is also a dangerous time for school leaders because it is incredibly easy to design plans for an idealized version of our schools rather than the messy reality of human organizations. We look at that blank calendar and we assume that human energy is infinite. Let's be honest, what we design right now in June and July, that dictates what happens when the staff returns. We've all walked into that school gymnasium or an auditorium during that first week back, and we watch the house lights go down and witness the arrival of the beginning of the school slide deck. You know that one. It's the one with 50 slides and it's packed with district goals, new data tracking platforms, a revised attendance policy, 3 new instructional frameworks, a calendar of benchmarks, and all of this is going to start on week 2. I mean, we call it professional development, but if we're being accurate, it's an initiative blitz. We treat the opening week of school like a packing contest, trying to force every single operational and academic priority into the heads of our staff before the kids cross the threshold. But here is what is interesting. By October, half of those slides are forgotten. And by January, the new software platform is barely being used. And by March, we've completely faded back into our old habits. We design these massive, high intensity launches in July because the building is quiet and our plans look perfect on paper. But we forget that human beings have to implement them. When we overwhelm our teachers with a barrage of compliance and strategy in week 1, we accidentally send a message that checking the boxes matters way more than culture. We assume that because we presented it, they understand it, and because they understand it, they can execute it. That's why this conversation matters so much right now. In today's episode, we're going to break down the slide deck mirage. We're going to look at why the traditional August initiative blitz fails and how to design an opening week system that prioritizes psychological safety, and how to build a pacing model that ensures your highest priorities actually survive the school year. Before we dive into the operational mechanics of how to restructure this, we're going to take a break, and we're going to hear from our network sponsor, Grunmeyer Leader Services.
This segment is sponsored by Grunmeyer Leader Services. Since 2013, GLS has been a trusted partner for school districts across the Midwest, specializing in executive recruitment and leadership support. They believe that great schools start with great leaders, and they are here to help you find the perfect fit for your district. Transform your school's future with the right leader. Visit GrunmeyerLeaderSearch.com to learn more. Grunmeyer Leader Services, transforming education one leader at a time.
Let's start with a recognizable school reality that plays out in almost every building across the country. Think about your building during the faculty meeting on the first Tuesday afternoon of the contract year. The air conditioning is struggling to keep up with a room full of adults. Your teachers have spent the morning looking at a blank wall in their classroom, thinking about the desks they need to move, the bulletin boards that they need to hang, the boxes they need to unpack, and the lesson plans they need to write for day 1. Their physical environments are disorganized, and mentally, they are trying to transition from the autonomy of summer back into that highly regulated, bell-driven schedule that we call a school day. Then we gather them in a common room and we hand them a binder or we click through a slide deck. We spend 3 hours explaining the nuance of the new multi tiered system of supports, the exact wording of the new updated dress code, or the new parameters for the grading scale and the logistics of the lunchroom duty rotation. We've all seen this. We've all done this. We do it because we feel the immense pressure of time. As leaders, we look at the school calendar and think, I only have these 3 days with my entire staff before the students arrive. If I don't tell them everything right now, when will I tell them? I mean, it comes from a good place. It comes from a desire to be thorough and transparent, and really to our hope that our teachers can be completely prepared. We don't want anyone to say that they didn't know the policy. But here is the system's error that we make. We confuse exposure with mastery. We assume that because a teacher sat through a 45-minute presentation on a new literacy intervention or a digital behavior tracking tool, they now possess the capacity to implement it with fidelity on September 1st. I mean, think about that for a second. If a teacher is sitting in an afternoon session feeling panicked about their classroom setup, wondering if they have enough copies for Monday morning, or worrying about if they're going to introduce themselves to 30 families, how much of that data presentation are they actually absorbing? Their cognitive load is completely maxed out by the immediate tactical needs of survival. When we hit teachers with this initiative blitz during this window, we aren't actually preparing them. We're just offloading our own administrative anxiety right onto their desks. We feel better because we've covered the material, but the staff is left feeling overwhelmed, fragmented, and disconnected. When I look back at the buildings that I have led, I have learned that our systems have to acknowledge this human reality. I became very explicit with my leadership teams and frankly, our teaching staff about the expectations that the very first week of school, we don't want anything but relationship building, nothing else. No heavy diagnostic testing on day 2, no rigorous compliance drills on day 3, and certainly no jumping straight into the text on day 1. Let's be honest about why this is a non negotiable principle. There is always time for academics. We have 9 months for curriculum benchmarks and assessments. But if students don't feel safe, if they do not feel welcomed, and if they don't feel like a true valued part of that classroom community within those first 5 days, they'll not learn at the level that they're capable of, period. And as leaders, we have to recognize that an investment in culture early on is not a soft addition to our work. It's actually an investment in instructional infrastructure. If we skip the culture building phase because we are in an administrative rush to hit the pacing guide, it always shows up later as systemic friction. It shows up in October as we struggle to have a highly functioning classroom. It shows up in November as a spike in behavioral referrals, and it shows up in January as a total lack of student engagement. If the classroom culture is fractured, no amount of high yield instructional strategies will save the lesson. But to get teachers to believe this and to get them to actually practice it, our leadership systems have to back it up. We cannot stand on a stage and tell teachers to focus entirely on relationships with kids if our own professional development week is entirely focused on compliance, data, and competing initiatives. Our systems must mirror our expectations. If we want teachers to create a calm, welcoming, relationship-driven environment for students, then we as leaders must create a calm, clear, and relationship-driven environment for our teachers during those opening weeks. We have to pace ourselves. When we pack the first week with every single goal for the entire year, we set up a cycle where we start an unsustainable sprint, and then we naturally fade back into our old habits because human energy is just finite. We need to move away from the big launch model and move towards a continuous, staged implementation model. We have to learn to manage the release of information based on when people actually need to use it, not when it is just convenient for us to present it. Now that we have identified the tension of this initiative blitz, let's move from understanding the challenge to examining the practical, systemic implications for your work right now in July. How do we actually transition away from the slide deck mirage and build an opening week and an annual calendar that sets teachers up for success? The first question we have to ask ourselves as we sit in our offices this month is simple. Does our current system set up teachers for success? And do they actually know how it does it? Or do we just assume that they get it because we sent a document through email? Let's look at the operational reality of that question. Too often, we assume clarity exists just because we wrote a policy down in a staff handbook. We assume teachers know how to navigate the system because we sent that logistical email in July. But true leadership clarity means creating visible pathways that remove friction for your staff. If we want teachers to focus on relationship building during week one, we have to intentionally subtract administrative tasks from their plates during that same window. We can't just add expectations without removing the logistical noise that drains their energy. Think about your building's opening week schedule. If you have 8 hours of designated professional development time, how much of that is spent with teachers sitting passively in rows? What would happen if you audit that time right now? In July, ask yourself what absolutely requires a synchronous face to face meeting and what can be handled through an asynchronous video or a clear one-page reference guide that your teachers can come back to when they're ready to come back to it. If a policy change is purely compliance driven, maybe a change to the field trip pre approval process or an update to the maintenance ticketing system, don't waste prime real estate time on the opening week agenda to present it live. Put it in a short screencasted video that teachers can watch at their own pace during room preparation time. Or create a simple laminated how to cheat sheet that they can put on their desk. Protect that collective space for collaborative thinking, alignment in our school culture, and frankly, psychological safety. This brings us to the core concept of design pacing. Instead of introducing all four of your school improvement goals on day one, pick the single most critical lever for the first quarter and stick with just that one. If your primary focus for the year is improving Tier 1 instructional engagement, maybe it's through formative assessment, well, focus your August professional development exclusively on those foundational elements of that specific engagement strategy. Leave the secondary initiatives, the new technology tools, cross curricular planning, the rubrics, advanced data, dashboards, all of that stuff. Leave that for later. Leave it for October, January, or February. When you space out your initiatives across the 4 quarters of the school year, we give our teachers the cognitive breathing room to master one skill before we ask them to layer on another. We change the culture from a frantic race to complete tasks to a steady, deliberate practice of building habits. We demonstrate that we care about the depth of implementation rather than the appearance of compliance. Let's talk about what this looks like for onboarding new staff members, because honestly, this is where the initiative bliss does the most damage. You know this type, the first year teacher who is eager, but also incredibly nervous and trying desperately to look like they have everything under control and that they belong. They smile, they nod during every presentation because they don't want to seem incompetent. But when we put that new hire through a multi day onboarding blitz where we dump every policy, every curriculum guide, every historical building tradition and software login right into their laps, and we do this all at one time, we aren't supporting them, we're drowning them. And we are inducing the very anxiety that causes that early career burnout. A high functioning onboarding system, it recognizes that a new teacher doesn't need to know how to navigate the spring parent teacher conference scheduling software or the end of year testing protocols when we're talking about this in August. They need to know how to log into the attendance system on Monday morning. They need to know where to find the copier paper or who to call if a student gets sick during class and how to manage the first 45 minutes of their class. True onboarding is a slow drip coffee maker. It's that system that unfolds over the first semester. It provides the right information at the exact moment that it is needed, rather than providing all information at the moment of highest anxiety. It sets monthly checkpoints where information is introduced contextually. When you look at your plans for the upcoming year, look at them through the lens of that new teacher or through the eyes of your veteran teacher who is tired of the annual flavor of the month initiative that is introduced with all of that great fanfare in August and then is abandoned by November. Ask yourself, are we designing a launch that looks good to the central office because it ticks every box on a district checklist? Or are we designing a launch that supports the psychological and operational reality of our classroom teachers? When we prioritize clarity over coverage, we build trust. We demonstrate to our staff that we respect their time, we understand their workload, and we are committed to keeping the main thing the main thing. As we wrap up today's conversation, let's synthesize what we've already discussed. July is a beautiful time for strategy, but the real test of leadership isn't the perfection of our summer plans. It's the sustainability of those plans when the building is full of students and the daily crises begin to accumulate. The slide deck Mirage tells us that if we present it, it is implemented. But we know the reality of school leadership tells us that if we overwhelm our staff during week one, we sacrifice the psychological safety and the relationships that form the foundation of a highly functioning school. Excellence is not built through an August blitz of emails and presentations. It is built through consistent, paced execution over time. As you spend this week reflecting on your opening routines, your professional development schedules, and maybe even your expectations that are coming for the fall, I want to leave you with one central question to consider. What can you take off the August plate to ensure that your teachers have the time, energy, and clarity to build deep, meaningful relationships with their students during that first critical week back? Remember, we are playing a long game. The goal is not an impressive sprint in August that fades by October. The goal is a steady, intentional pace that allows our staff and our students to thrive all year long. Give your teachers the permission to focus on culture first and trust that the systemic alignment that you build through clarity will take care of the compliance. Thanks for being part of the work, and thank you for spending your time with us here on Your Morning Boost on the Forward Ed Network. We appreciate everything you do for your students and your community, and we'll be right back here again next week to talk with you again on Your Morning Boost.
That's your morning boost from AWB Education and Media. If this episode helped you reset your thinking or take your next step forward, share it with a colleague. And don't forget to subscribe so your next boost is ready when you need it. Keep showing up with intention. Keep moving forward, and we'll see you next time.